New heat on former Trump advisor Hope Hicks tonight, stemming from the Mueller probe. These court documents that just came out suggest she might have misled Congress when she faced questioning. It's a reminder, though, of how high stakes any committee grilling can be. Hicks' problems stem from prosecutors closing that Michael Cohen campaign finance probe, which the New York Times calls an apparent legal victory for Trump. But Democrats say there's no time to celebrate. They'll be deploying Wednesday's Mueller hearing to hammer shocking evidence of criminal misconduct. House Judiciary Chair Nadler laying out the plan.
We will ask questions designed to elicit the information, designed to get the information out that we want, designed to show what his report found that is at odds with what the administration and the Attorney General have been saying.
I'm joined by David Korn and Maya Wiley, both experts on this beat. Nice to see you on this Friday.
Good to see you.
Good to be with you.
What are you looking for on Wednesday?
We talked about this a week ago, and we thought he would be testifying this week. And I said the key words were within the lines. You know, whether he would stay within the lines that we expect and say nothing beyond the report, or whether he would go a little beyond that, even in terms of putting italics in, adding an exclamation point. Because I think even him doing a dramatic reading.
What about a highlighter?
A highlighter, yellow, you know, whatever, emoji, something that would just give some more attention to some of the findings. We saw when he did his press. It wasn't a press conference, his press appearance that was 9 minutes long. It gave a lot more juice to the report because it is long. Most Americans, in fact, almost every American has not read it.
What emoji do you give Volume 1 and 2 of the report?
Mostly thumbs ups, but maybe a little bit like that for some. But I did.
See, because I think, and Maya, I'm going to bring you in here, at the end of the day, Volume 1 on whether there was election conspiracy was definitely one of these. You know this emoji, right? Mm-hmm. And then Volume 2 was like a burning mad face of like Mueller in his legal way saying there's more than one crime here. Substantial evidence of more than one crime.
Yes, and I think that was what was interesting about the roadmap we saw today is, at least for House Judiciary Committee, they're going, the things that they're identifying to focus on with Robert Mueller are the places in the report where his report says things like substantial evidence, obstructive act, meaning you could literally ask Mueller to read the section or the sentence, or they could read it and ask him a very pointed question. In fact, you found in your report that there was an obstructive act and substantial evidence that Donald Trump was trying to interfere with your investigation. That is the kind of thing that is very smart.
And this is the tension that you lay out between you, the prosecutor, telling us how to ask these questions, and you, among other things, a Washington expert. Anyone who's seen a little bit of a hearing knows they struggle to ask these questions the right way. And take a look at Neil Katyal, who this week previewed for us how you'd really do it. Take a look.
So Donald Trump tweeted right after the report came out, he said, no collusion, no obstruction, totally exonerates the president. So question number one, Mr. Mueller, Trump says that you found no obstruction. Is that true? Question number two, Trump says that you found no collusion. Is that true? Question number three, did your report totally exonerate the president? Yes or no? That's simple.
Those are good questions. And you have, 24 or so Democrats in the Judiciary Committee, all get 5 minutes. They're going to have to really make sure they coordinate and don't go in different directions, because in between their questions, the Republicans will basically be asking Mueller, tell us the ways that you're part of the Obama deep state conspiracy that was designed to get rid of Trump 10 years ago before we even knew he was going to run. But the other thing to remember is there are two hearings on Wednesday. The first is Judiciary Committee, then they take a break, they wipe the chairs down, and then they bring in the Intelligence Committee, which will go after the issue of Trump and Russia.
But you think Neil's questions, nailing it that way, are good?
I think those are good for the opening. Right. But I do think, and this is my bias, I wrote a book on this with Isikoff, that focusing overly on the obstruction issue, as opposed to Trump having played footsie with Russia and denying the attack and making it easier for Russia, that to me is the bigger deal in a lot of ways. And to the American public, if you can't convince them of that being a big deal, then whether he obstructed the investigation is not going to be, I think, as important. It is important to us. We care about these things. But I think the big story is Russia attacked. He helped. He benefited. That's in the report. And that should get as much attention as what he told Don McGahn to say.
Well, I agree absolutely with the importance of the attention on what Russia did and why, in fact, we should have a lot of serious concerns about Donald Trump and those in his administration even now, right? And Jared Kushner, who are actively and aggressively trying to get the benefit from Russians, and also the way their policies have lined up to benefit Russia, which doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of national security. At the same time, I think the obstruction does matter, and I think it matters a lot if they do what Neil Katyal is saying and going into the meat of it in their 5 areas, because polls show that Republicans actually are concerned about if they get the message, if they get the facts of the report, they actually are concerned about whether or not there is someone in power who might be abusing it.
And narrowing the questions in a way where people actually can hear the clear implication. I'm sure you remember Common, formerly known as Common Sense, the musician.
Yeah.
And you remember his song, The Questions, David?
My favorite song.
Where he says,
why is this night different from all the nights?
Well, that's the 4 questions, which really relates to some of this. I mean, that's an immigration story if you want one. Exodus, movement of Ja people, as Bob Marley would say. But Common famously asked in The Questions, why I gotta have ID to get ID? If I had ID, I wouldn't need ID.
It's catch-22. But I will
We're
say,
out of time, so keep it.
One small point.
Nail it.
One small point.
Nail it, David.
Republicans want to make Wednesday into a circus. They'll do everything possible to make that clear message not come through.
But you can't blame the Republicans. And Maya gets the final word. Republicans can make noise. Democrats have the gavel. It's up to them.
Absolutely. And, mob deep, because, son, people scared. You know why, Ari. Say it with me.
Son, people scared because there's no such thing as halfway crooks.
Get up, stand up.
Fight for your right to party?
That works too.
Wow, I think we did a lot here.
We did.
We did a lot. If you're watching still, thank you. And thanks to David and Maya. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.